On a dark night in October 1994 in South Carolina, a car containing two small children slowly sank beneath the waves. Their mother, Susan Smith, stood on the shore and watched the car disappear into the depths. She later claimed the children had been kidnapped by an armed man, but her lie was soon exposed. Susan Lee Wong was born on September 26, 1971, in Union, South Carolina. Her childhood was not easy. Her parents, Harry and Linda, experienced constant conflict. When Susan was only 7 years old, her father committed suicide, which was a devastating blow to the entire family. This event left a deep mark on the girl's psyche, shaping her perception of instability and unreliability in family relationships. After her father's death, Susan's mother remarried. Relationships in her new family were difficult. Susan felt neglected, often marginalized and left out. As a teenager, she experienced episodes of depression, accompanied by attempts at self-harm. Despite this, those around her described her as a cheerful and sociable girl. School wasn't going smoothly. In high school, Susan tried to be actively involved in social life, but she often struggled with her personal relationships. She strove to be accepted and needed love and approval. Her teenage years were spent searching for her place and struggling with internal conflicts. After finishing school, Susan found work at a local factory and then at a company office. It was there that she met David Smith. The young couple quickly became close, and Susan soon married. The marriage proved unstable. The couple argued frequently, and their relationship was marked by infidelity and mistrust. Despite the conflicts, they had two sons, Michael, born in 1991, and Alexander, nicknamed Alex, born in 1993. Motherhood didn't bring Susan the stability she'd longed for. She continued to experience inner conflict and dissatisfaction. Her marriage to David was on the rocks. He accused his wife of infidelity and reproached her for her inability to cope with her responsibilities. Susan herself felt that her husband wasn't providing her with emotional support. Arguments became increasingly frequent, and by the mid-1990s, the couple had effectively separated. Divorce and caring for two young children weighed heavily on Susan's shoulders. She was often alone, without someone she could confide in. Attempts to arrange her personal life led to further disappointments. Her affair with Tom Finley, the son of a wealthy local businessman, played a significant role in her subsequent developments. The relationship gave Susan hope for a new life, but he made it clear he did not want to commit to a woman with children. This factor became key in shaping the motive for the crime. Susan feared losing her new relationship, which she considered her only chance at happiness. Instead of accepting the situation or seeking other solutions, she gradually came to a disastrous decision. Family and friends noticed Susan's mood swings. At one moment, she would appear to be a caring mother, while at others, she would express irritation toward her children. She increasingly spoke of feeling trapped. The pressure of external circumstances and internal psychological problems set the stage for a tragedy that would soon shake not only her city, but the entire country. After her divorce from David Smith, Susan's life began to resemble a continuous series of emotional crises. Although she formally fulfilled her duties as a mother, her inner world was focused on searching for a new relationship. During this time, she met Tom Finley, a man who played a decisive role in her life. Tom was younger than her and came from a wealthy family. He worked for his father's company and came across as confident, goal-oriented, and independent. For Susan, meeting him symbolized hope for a new life. She saw this relationship as an opportunity to escape her familiar surroundings and find the stability and love she'd been missing. At first, the romance went well. Tom showed her attention, invited her to meet up, and created a sense of perspective. Susan quickly became infatuated and began to see him as her future life partner. However, the young couple's views on the future diverged greatly. Tom Finley made no secret of his reluctance to take on responsibility for someone else's children. He openly stated that he wasn't ready to be a stepfather or to commit to a woman who already had two children. This was a painful blow for Susan. She knew the relationship wouldn't progress unless the situation changed. The psychological pressure was compounded by Susan's habit of viewing a man's love and attention as a source of her own significance. She suffered from loneliness and feared rejection. The threat of losing Tom was perceived as a catastrophe that dashed all hope. At the same time, life with children was becoming increasingly difficult for her. Michael and Alex were still very young and required constant care. Susan increasingly complained to friends that she was tired of her responsibilities, that her children were restricting her freedom and interfering with her personal life. These words weren't always taken seriously, but they revealed her inner state. She saw her sons not only as a source of joy, but also as an obstacle. Tom Finley soon ended the relationship. He wrote Susan a letter in which he bluntly explained that he didn't want to continue the affair precisely because of her children. This letter became a turning point for her. She wasn't ready to accept the breakup and sought ways to regain his favor. The idea that it was the children that were preventing her from building a new relationship became firmly ingrained in her mind. Against this backdrop, Susan presented an outward appearance of calm, but was internally plunged into despair. She continued to maintain a semblance of normality, working, socializing with friends, and caring for her children. However, her behavior increasingly showed signs of instability. Family and friends recalled that she appeared depressed and withdrawn during those weeks. Her relationship with her ex-husband remained strained. David wanted to maintain contact with the children, but his visits with them were accompanied by conflicts with Susan. She accused him of indifference and of destroying the family. For her, this was further confirmation that the past was bringing no relief, and a future without Tom seemed impossible. The pent-up tension resulted in a series of behaviors that experts later assessed as preparatory steps for a crime. Susan became increasingly preoccupied with how to get rid of the problem. In her mind, the children became an obstacle to a new life. In the evenings, she remained alone and pondered the hopelessness of her situation. On the one hand, she couldn't come to terms with the loss of her relationship with Tom. On the other, she saw the children as the source of her problems. These thoughts gradually formed a catastrophic plan, which for Susan became an increasingly realistic way out of the impasse. Outwardly, this manifested itself in her attempts to justify her dissatisfaction with the children to others. She said it was too hard for her, that she couldn't cope alone. At the same time, she continued to seek out Tom, hoping to convince him of the possibility of a future together. His refusal became increasingly harsh and final. Thus, by the end of October 1994, Susan found herself in a situation where her personal hopes had been dashed. Her relationship with her ex-husband offered no relief, and caring for her children seemed an unbearable burden. She found herself under the pressure of her own illusions and emotional instability. All of this created the conditions for her decision to be translated into action. On the evening of October 25, 1994, Susan Smith picked up her sons, 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alex, and drove off in her Mazda. Outwardly, the day seemed like any other, but internally, she had already formed a plan to get rid of the children. She decided to stage a kidnapping to clear herself of suspicion. Her plan was to make it look like an unknown man had stolen the car with the children inside. In reality, the ultimate goal was murder. Late that evening, Susan headed to John D. Long Lake. The children were seated in the back seat, buckled in. At the shore, she left the car running, shifted the transmission into neutral, and, getting out, pushed the car toward the water. The car slowly rolled down the slope and sank in a pond. Susan watched it sink, making no attempt to stop it. Upon returning home, Susan called the police. She reported that an armed African-American man had stopped her at an intersection, forced her out of the car, and stolen the car and children inside. She said it all happened quickly and unexpectedly. The news caused a huge stir. Police mobilized to search, and the FBI and volunteers joined in. Local television stations broadcast footage of press conferences where Susan tearfully pleaded with the kidnapper to return the children. For many Union residents, she looked like a victim. However, Inconsistencies quickly emerged in her story. She became confused about the details. She couldn't describe the exact location of the attack and changed the description of the hijacker. Investigators noted that her emotions seemed superficial, as if feigned. Despite a massive search, no evidence of the abduction was found. No one had seen the car that was allegedly stolen. Susan's interrogations grew increasingly intense, and her testimony contradicted the facts. 9 days after the children's disappearance, the pressure on Susan intensified. During interrogation, she broke down and admitted to driving the car into the water herself. On November 3rd, she officially signed a confession. The next day, divers recovered the car from the bottom of the pond. Inside were the bodies of Michael and Alex, still strapped in. The discovery of the car sealed the abduction theory and confirmed Susan's account. The crime shocked the country with its cold-bloodedness. What began as a drama about missing children culminated in the exposure of a mother who had single-handedly sent them to their death for the illusion of a new life. Within hours of Susan Smith's report of her children's abduction, Union County Police launched a search operation. Local police, volunteers, and federal agents were involved. Checkpoints were set up at entrances and exits of the city, and vehicles were checked to see if they matched the description of the stolen Mazda. Photos of little Michael and Alex appeared in the press, and the county community actively joined the search. Susan behaved as one would expect a mother deprived of her children. She gave interviews, cried in front of the cameras, and pleaded with the kidnapper to return her children. These images were broadcast on national television, creating the image of a woman in despair. However, attentive observers, including police officers, noted oddities in her behavior. She appeared overly composed. Her emotions seemed restrained and sometimes artificial. The investigation examined every element of her story. According to Susan, the abduction occurred in the evening at an intersection. She claimed that a stranger with a gun forced her out of her car and then drove off with the children. But there were no witnesses at the scene, and Susan's descriptions of her attacker constantly changed. She sometimes claimed he was tall, sometimes said he was of average height, and sometimes specified details of his clothing that contradicted her previous statements. Particularly noteworthy was the fact that Susan couldn't explain why no passers-by or drivers noticed the attack at the time. The area was quite busy, but not a single surveillance camera or eyewitness corroborated her story. Investigators simultaneously investigated her personal relationships. Soon, a letter from Tom Finley came to light, in which he explicitly stated that he was not prepared to continue a relationship with a woman with children. This information led police to suspect that the desire to maintain a relationship could have been the motive for the crime. Susan's interrogations became increasingly intense. The police noted that she was too meticulous in sticking to one story and was clearly afraid of additional questions. When asked to recount the evening's events in detail, the details became confused. Several times, she changed the time, route, and circumstances of the attack. With doubts mounting, the police decided to increase the pressure. During another interrogation, investigators presented her with facts that completely contradicted the kidnapping story. Susan became visibly nervous, and her answers became contradictory. November 3rd, 1994, was the turning point. After a lengthy conversation, Susan admitted the abduction never happened and described driving the car into the water herself. She signed an official confession. The very next day, divers began searching John D. Long Lake. The car was located relatively quickly. When it was brought to the surface, the bodies of Michael and Alex were inside, still strapped in with their seat belts. This discovery definitively confirmed Susan's theory and proved her guilt. The investigation entered a new phase. The focus was now shifting from finding the missing children to preparing a criminal case against their mother. Susan's confession became the central element of the evidence base. Additionally, witness statements, documents about her relationship with Tom Finley, and information about family conflicts and marital problems were collected. The public reaction to the revelation was immediate and extremely strong. For a week, city residents sympathized with Susan, helped search for her children, and considered her a victim. When the truth came out, The mood shifted to indignation and shock. Newspapers published photographs of Susan at press conferences, alongside shots of the car recovered from water. The district attorney's office announced its intention to seek the maximum sentence. Susan Smith was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Her conduct and confession made the case one of the most high-profile in South Carolina history. Immediately after Susan Smith confessed to murdering her children, investigators began preparing for trial. The Union County Prosecutor's Office announced it would seek the maximum sentence. The prosecution relied on several key facts: the defendant's confession, a letter from Tom Finley suggesting a possible motive, and physical evidence related to the discovery of the car containing the children's bodies at the bottom of John D. Long Lake. The case sparked a national outcry. The media covered every step of the investigation and trial. A pressing question arose in society. Should the mother, who cold-bloodedly took the lives of her own children, be sentenced to death or deserve life imprisonment? The trial began in the summer of 1995. The courtroom was packed with journalists and local residents. The atmosphere was tense. On the one hand, the prosecution portrayed Susan as a woman who knowingly and cold-bloodedly sent her children to their deaths for her own benefit. On the other, the defense attempted to prove that the defendant was in a state of psychological crisis and did not fully understand the consequences of her actions. Prosecutors insisted the crime was meticulously planned. They pointed out that Susan deliberately chose the time and place, buckled the children into the car, started the engine, and pushed the car into the water. She then deliberately deceived the police and the public by creating a false narrative of abduction. According to the prosecution, these circumstances ruled out the possibility of a random act or temporary insanity. The defense, on the other hand, focused on the defendant's emotional state. The lawyers argued that Susan suffered from severe depression caused by her divorce, her breakup with Finley, and chronic problems in her personal life. They cited her childhood trauma, particularly her father's suicide, and said she was emotionally unstable. Witnesses testified during the trial. Relatives, neighbors, and colleagues described Susan in varying ways. Some described her as a caring mother, while others recalled instances of irritation and complaints about the difficulties of raising children. Particular attention was paid to a letter from Tom Finley, in which he explicitly stated that he was not prepared to be with a woman with children. This document became one of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence, demonstrating a possible motive. Psychiatrists called by both sides offered differing assessments. Defense experts spoke of signs of emotional distress, but did not claim that Susan had completely lost the ability to account for her actions. Prosecution experts insisted the defendant had no mental illness that would absolve her of responsibility. During the trial, Susan made several statements expressing regret for what had happened. She said she loved her children but was in a state of despair and saw no way out. However, from many jurors and observers, her words were not convincing enough. The verdict was the subject of lengthy deliberations by the jury. They had to decide whether Susan deserved the death penalty or life imprisonment. The final decision was a compromise. On July 22, 1995, the court found Susan Smith guilty of 2 murders and sentenced her to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This meant that she would not be able to apply for release for the first time until 2024. At that time, she was 23 years old, and her prospect for release remained extremely uncertain. After the verdict was announced, reactions to the court's decision were mixed. Some South Carolinians considered it too lenient and called for the death penalty. Others said life imprisonment for such a young man was sufficient punishment. Susan was sent to the Women's Correctional Facility in Lexington, where she remains serving her sentence to this day. Her name will forever remain etched in American crime history as a symbol of one of the most resonant and shocking crimes of the 1990s. The Susan Smith case became one of the most talked about crimes of the 1990s in the United States. It demonstrated how personal crises and psychological instability can lead to tragedy that affects not only a family, but an entire community. Her life sentence cemented her fate and cemented her case in the annals of crime history.